Welcome back to the deep dive. Our job here is to take the overwhelming stack of information, the articles, the research, the data, and distill it down to the pure, potent essence you need to be truly well-informed. Today, we are strapping in for what is perhaps the most crucial deep dive we've ever undertaken. We're looking at the most recent and arguably most cataclysmic shift in human consciousness caused by artificial intelligence.
It's a huge topic.
Yeah.
And when we talk about AI, the public conversation often gets stuck in this kind of sci-fi loop.
The Terminator scenario.
Exactly, the Skynet thing.
Yeah.
We hear about the promise of, miracle cures and massive efficiency gains, or we hear the fear of a literal machine takeover. But the source material we've gathered today, which spans cognitive science, philosophy, tech reporting, it all argues that the real danger is already here.
Okay.
It's far more subtle, it's insidious, and it involves a willing, slow self-destruction through total dependence.
Okay, let's unpack this. So we're not here today to debate robot ethics or whether an LLM can, successfully mimic Hemingway.
No.
The mission is much more focused. We are analyzing sources that argue AI is fundamentally altering how humans process, store, and access information, and that this alteration is leading directly to intellectual decay, a dangerous phenomenon known as cognitive debt, and ultimately the erosion of our ability to perceive objective reality.
Precisely. We are diving into why using AI, even for seemingly innocuous tasks like, summarizing a massive document for work or generating an outline for a presentation, is argued by these sources to be, and this is a quote, destroying you personally, and maybe a bit more dramatically, aiding the destruction of civilization. It's an incredibly stark claim, I know.
It is.
But when you view it through the lens of history and you look at these preceding technological shifts, the parallels are genuinely, compelling.
And here's where it gets really interesting, right? Because this idea that technology reshapes the fundamental human mind, this is not new.
Not at all.
Humanity has consistently experienced these shifts in consciousness that correspond to major technological advances. It's all about how we take in and access information, and crucially, what the brain then has to do to organize that information.
If we look back, centuries back, the printing press was a foundational moment. It completely decentralized information access.
Right. Before the press, knowledge, in monasteries.
Highly centralized and mediated, yeah. It was held by the church, by royalty. You had to physically go to the information and someone else decided what you got to see.
And then suddenly an explosion of texts.
An absolute explosion. And that forced the human mind on a mass scale to develop entirely new methods of filtration, of categorization, of critical comparison. It literally changed how scholarship functioned.
But the sources we looked at really stressed that in more modern history, the introduction of television represented one of the biggest, fastest shifts in recorded human consciousness.
It was a massive leap. It changed the way we received information almost instantly.
And this wasn't just about getting news faster, was it?
No, not at all. Our sources emphasized that television fundamentally altered the internal process of human thought. Think about it. Before TV, if you read a novel or you listened to a radio broadcast, your mind was actively engaged.
You're building the world in your head.
You are the co-creator of the mental landscape. You're constructing the images, the settings, the characters' expressions. Your brain is doing that work.
That's a massive point. The TV, it just outsources all of that visualization.
Completely. It delivers the visual and auditory inputs fully formed, and this altered the way we, quote, picture things in our mind. And consequently, it changed how we process and store knowledge, and even how we build coherent thought. It was a change in the internal processing architecture of the human brain itself.
And what's fascinating here, and this connects directly to AI, is the historical interest in controlling that new input.
Yes. The sources note that this isn't just, fringe speculation. Entities like the CIA were demonstrably interested in understanding how televised media could be used for social control.
Literal mind control was the phrase I saw.
That was the phrase. Because if you can control the primary source of image and narrative for a population, you gain significant influence over societal perceptions, morality, and behavior. Every major shift in communication technology, by its very nature, fundamentally alters how we think.
Okay, so then we fast forward, skipping decades of analog media, and we land on the internet and what became known as the Google effect.
Which was another monumental shift in information storage.
So?
The internet became, for the first time, this great information safety net. The Google effect, which studies have thoroughly documented, is deceptively simple. If you know a piece of information is readily available online, that it's just 2 clicks and a search term away, you are significantly less likely to bother storing that information internally.
You outsource the memory function?
You outsource it to the digital cloud, exactly. The cost of forgetting became zero, so the incentive to remember just advanced.
And then social media arrived.
Yeah.
And that compounded the issue by altering how we interact with that information, demanding constant, fleeting attention.
Yeah. And our sources acknowledge that social media caused this profound shift in how we take in, process, and store information. It fundamentally changed civilization.
Yeah.
That's a huge topic in its own right, of course.
Another deep dive for another day.
For sure. But we move swiftly now to what the sources are calling the AI overlord premise.
Okay.
The central and very uncomfortable thesis our sources present is that the machines already are our overlord.
And that's not a prediction.
It's not a prediction, it's a description of our current reality.
You're referencing the enduring paradox that was laid bare by the 2013 Snowden revelations, aren't you?
That's it exactly. When he detailed the sheer pervasive extent of surveillance, how our machines were designed to spy on us every hour of every day, his greatest publicly stated fear was that people would learn the truth and simply do nothing.
And that's pretty much what happened.
Tragically, that fear was realized. We confirmed that Google, Apple, Meta, every major platform was mining all our data constantly, and yet we collectively chose convenience over privacy.
We just kept using them.
We willingly continue to use these products, update our social media profiles, and post content. And that content is now explicitly being used via massive computational power to train AI.
So the chilling conclusion drawn by the source material is that machines didn't need to mount some kind of rebellion or physically enslave us
We happily enslaved ourselves.
to the dopamine loops of our devices.
Yes, the machines won the moment we collectively decided that the next fleeting distraction, the doom scroll, was more important than our fundamental privacy, our peace of mind, or our mental health. That pre-existing dependence on the screen, that is the fertile soil where this new AI dependency is now taking root.
That sets the stage perfectly. Let's move into section 1 then. The state of pervasive AI and the illusion of augmentation. Because before we can even get to the cognitive damage, we have to acknowledge this environment of usage, which, as you just said, is characterized by this mass acceptance, of ethical black hole.
It truly is. It's the Snowden paradox repeating itself, but with exponentially higher stakes. We need to detail the actual methods AI companies are employing to obtain the training data that makes these LLMs function.
Because the public seems shockingly unconcerned.
Shockingly unconcerned by the sheer scale of the appropriation.
Okay, so let's start with corporate data. The sources emphasize that these mega social media corporations, often directed by what one source called automaton CEOs.
I like that term.
Me too. They're using very specific and aggressive legal strategies to ensure that everything you type, everything you post or share can be legally used to train their large language models.
It's buried in the terms and conditions, the ones nobody ever reads. They just get longer and more convoluted every year.
And the scope isn't just limited to our user data, right? It's much bigger.
Oh, much bigger. We saw a frenzy in the publishing world. Large publishing conglomerates started signing these major sweeping deals with AI companies. And these deals explicitly granted them the right to use their entire catalog, every book, article, and poem the conglomerate had published over decades, to train their AI systems.
So you're talking about granting a private company the literary history of hundreds of years in a single digital gulp.
In a single gulp. And there was a very specific, high-profile example of this land.
The Meta attempt to buy Simon.
That's the one. And you have to ask why. It wasn't primarily for market share in the publishing. The sources are clear. It was explicitly to gain immediate, unfettered access to their vast, decades-old back catalog of printed works for LLM training.
That really illustrates the value they place on existing human intellectual property. It's the new oil.
It is. And what's happening now is even more direct. Authors are routinely being asked to sign riders or clauses in their publishing contracts that allow the publishers to use their future books for AI training.
And if they say no,
in many cases, refusing those clauses can jeopardize the publishing deal entirely. It's an immense amount of pressure.
So the conclusion drawn by those covering this beat is pretty stark. AI companies function as ethical black holes.
That's the term. They will continue to find new, legally convoluted ways to appropriate everything everyone has ever written, drawn, photographed, or recorded.
Yet the public continues to willingly hand over personal data, often with that line, I have nothing to hide.
Even though they know this data is actively building the machine that undermines their own intelligence, that acceptance is the fertile ground for dependence.
If the public accepts the moral and legal theft of intellectual property on this scale,
they are unlikely to worry about the smaller individual thefts of their own personal cognitive process. It's a normalization of extraction.
So let's look at the usage data. According to mid-2025 figures cited in the source material, roughly 27% of American adults report using AI constantly or at least several times a day.
And that 27% reported figure is actually viewed by technical experts as drastically conservative.
Really? Why?
Well, the sources suggest the number of people who interact with AI-driven services, often without even realizing it, is closer to 79%.
79%.
Yeah. AI is now so deeply integrated into everyday internet life, from customer service chats to search engine functions and personalized content feeds, that many users don't even register that they're constantly interacting with it. It's become, digital oxygen.
What I find genuinely interesting, though, is the cognitive dissonance here. Because despite that rising usage and the hidden integration, surveys are reporting a noticeable decrease in public interest in AI.
And even instances of outright AI disgust.
Right. We've seen the backlash against new AI actresses, AI singers, or those horrible, unsettling AI-generated advertisements that just feel wrong.
It's the Snowden scenario all over. A significant segment of society intellectually understands that AI is often horrible, uncanny, and sometimes outright unethical. Yet they still find themselves chatting with bots, letting AI summarize their emails, and using LLMs to shortcut their own thinking.
We feel the disgust, but we still choose the path of least resistance.
And that choice is the vulnerable.
Okay, so before we dig into that whole idea of outsource, we have to address the most common defense used by AI.
The false equivalence.
The false equivalence. They often say that being concerned about AI is just like being concerned about the arrival of the typewriter or the calculator or the camera. You're arguing this misunderstands.
Absolutely. We have to draw a very clear line. Look at typewriters or laptops. These tools function as extensions of human agency.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when you sit down at a laptop, you are still the one writing. You are controlling the ideas, planning the structure, deciding the syntax. The tool simply speeds up the mechanical delivery of your pre-existing human-generated thought.
It extends your capability. It doesn't replace the core cognitive task.
Exactly. But the sources emphasize that LLMs and generative AI are fundamentally different. They augment or replace human agents operating at the level of ideation itself.
The difference is intentionality.
It is. The AI isn't a faster pen. It is simulating the thought process itself. And this brings us back to that camera analogy.
Okay.
A camera performs a separate objective function. It reproduces reality using optics and chemicals or sensors. Cameras are rooted in objective reality. The light hitting the sensor is a real phenomenon.
Yes, the eye.
The crucial difference, as argued in the source, is that AI is rooted in non-real. It's rooted in statistical simulation. It just predicts the most likely next word. It doesn't strive for truth. It has no concept of truth.
So previous technologies, even the off-to-malign TV, were still extensions of human connection to reality, even if they mediated it.
Right. They were showing you something that at some point was real, but AI in its core function pretends to produce reality or consciousness without ever having experienced it.
And that substitution of simulation for reality, that's the pivotal difference.
That is the pivotal difference that makes AI uniquely damaging to the human psyche.
Okay, so let's pivot now to what the sources identify a truly dystopian data point here. And that is the dramatic, rapid shift in how we had a look at the Harvard Business Review 2024 report on early AI usage. What was the profile of the average user just a year ago?
In 2024, the usage profile was predominantly focused on productivity and creative augmentation. The top use was generating idea, brainstorming, getting outline, helping with creative hurdles.
It was an assistant.
It was an assistant. Therapy and companionship was already number 2, which is interesting in itself. But the emphasis was still on using AI as this intellectual sparring partner.
Yeah.
Web search, text editing, exploring topics. It was a cognitive assistant, helping the user scale their own thinking and writing.
And then the switch flipped. Let's look at the 2025 data shift.
This is the sobering observation. In the span of just 1 year, generating ideas plummeted. It fell all the way to 6th place. And the new top 3 uses signal a profound psychological dependency that should, frankly, terrify anyone concerned about intellectual integrity.
So the new top 3 uses are, number 1, therapy and companionship. Number 2, organizing my life. And number 3, finding purpose.
Think about the implications of that 1-year shift. Let that sink in.
It's staggering.
AI is no longer primarily a creative or intellectual assistant. It has become a tool for basic human function.
Therapy, organizing, and finding purpose. These are the messy, difficult, emotionally demanding tasks that define the human condition. They require self-reflection and connection to reality.
And we're allowing corporate LLMs, which are trained on scraped statistical language and programmed to be ultra-safe and non-controversial, to provide psychological assistance, diagnosis, and existential advice.
What kind of purpose are you going to find if it's generated by a machine whose primary goal is optimization and corporate safety?
The output will be inherently mediocre. It'll be designed to avoid controversy and maintain user engagement, not to challenge you toward authentic growth. The sources argue that this rapid shift suggests a profoundly dangerous level of personal, emotional, and cognitive reliance on a machine has developed on a civilizational scale.
It's the dystopian future, not delivered by some flash of radiation or a robot army,
but by a willing, convenient, silent slide into dependency.
Where we allow a statistical model to define our identity, our emotional landscape, and our very meaning.
It's a terror.
This slide into dependency brings us directly to Section 2, cognitive debt and the atrophy of the mind. If the machines are now responsible for our therapy and for finding our purpose, we have to ask, what happens when we let AI perform tasks that are absolutely essential?
And this is the core danger identified in all the sources, the outsourcing of essential human effort. And think about the variety of tasks we are now farming out. Asking an LLM to generate a complex grocery list based on dietary needs, drafting a heartfelt apology letter to a spouse, generating the outline for a challenging report, or asking it to mediate a political debate for us.
The fundamental question for the individual becomes, when the machine is doing the heavy lift, the complex, messy parts of life that require genuine emotional and intellectual effort, where does human thinking end?
And if we only handle the inputs and outputs, what does that leave us? What part is ours?
The empirical evidence, even in these early stages of widespread AI adoption, is already robust and concerning.
It is. Multiple sources confirm that reliance on AI systematically reduces intelligence, diminishes problem-solving skills, and severely limits creative elasticity.
And this decline isn't just confined to high-level logic thinking, is it? It hits basic literacy, too.
That's right. Studies are already confirming that AI usage reduces vocabulary acquisition, degrades grammar skills, and impairs reading comprehension when you measure it against the original text. This is why the sources formally define this concept of cognitive debt.
Okay, let's clearly define cognitive debt because it's really the centerpiece of this discussion. It sounds academic, but it's actually a very powerful and practical metaphor.
It is. Cognitive debt is a concept where deferring mental effort in the short term results in severe long-term intellectual costs.
Like a financial debt.
Exactly like that.
Huh?
Think of it like taking out a high-interest loan. You get the benefit of ease now, the short-term gratification of a finished task, but you pay interest later. And that interest comes in the form of diminished critical inquiry, increased vulnerability to manipulation by others, and a profound decrease in your own creativity. You exchange capacity.
And we see this played out beautifully or horribly in the critique of those studies that suggested AI improves reading comprehension. That's a claim often cited by AI promoters.
Oh yeah, they love those studies. They point to research like this. Readers are given a highly complex text, say a technical medical journal, or a dense financial article, and then they use an AI-generated simplification or explanation of that text. And when they're tested with a multiple-choice questionnaire about the content, the AI-aided readers score higher.
So the conclusion is, AI improves reading comprehension.
Right. But the source analysis argues this is a failure of logic. It's a profound misunderstanding of what genuine reading comprehension actually is.
How so?
It is not a demonstration of improved comprehension of the original text. The reader only comprehended the AI-generated simplification, and that simplification, in its quest to be simple, might have stripped out critical nuance, context, or the author's intended emphasis.
So you're comprehending the machine's interpretation, not the original complex work.
Exactly. And the underlying issue is the atrophy of mental effort. Real literacy, the kind that builds a powerful mind, requires work.
It's supposed to be hard sometimes.
It's supposed to be hard. If you encounter a complex article, you are forced to stop, look up unfamiliar vocabulary, maybe read 3 different supplementary articles to build context, and then synthesize that information. That difficult, frustrating process is how you build and maintain genuine mental muscles.
The human mind is designed to work up to gradually expand its capacity.
Yes, and these lovely, handy AI explainers are not a helpful tool. They are, as the sources argue, the next volley of attacks on basic literacy. They instantly satisfy the cognitive need, which removes all motivation for you to increase your own vocabulary, practice your synthesis skills, or grapple with complexity.
It's the machine effectively saying, this one is too challenging for your current level of intelligence, so I will ensure you stay comfortable right where you are.
And the long-term consequence is what they call the atrophy mechanism. The brain is a use-it-or-lose-it muscle. We all know that. If a machine consistently performs the heavy lift, the neural pathways associated with complex thought, memory retrieval, and linguistic processing will atrophy. And the cycle is self-reinforced. The user, having outsourced critical function, gets intellectually duller, finds the original complex tasks even harder, and thus needs the machine more, accelerating the debt accumulation.
And we have physical data supporting this mechanism, too. The sources reference a particularly telling study from MIT concerning brain.
This study found a systematic correlation. Brain connectivity in participants scaled down in direct proportion to the amount of external cognitive support they received from LLMs.
So the less the mind was required to struggle,
the less of the brain was actively being utilized during the task to direct measurable effect.
And the functional implication of that is profoundly
It is. Participants who wrote essays using LLM support were tested after and were literally unable to remember the arguments, the structure, or even the main points they had just written.
So they outsourced the cognitive process, and in doing so, outsourced the ability to form a memory about that effort.
Yes, the authors of the MIT study predict that widespread, pervasive implementation of LLM will result in a generalized societal decline in critical learning skills. Soon, users won't know how to articulate their own political opinions, draft an effective work email, or even internally categorize the pros and cons of buying a new piece of furniture without immediately reaching for the AI to process the information for them.
This depth of outsourcing inevitably leads to what one prominent French professor specializing in information technology called a generalized illusion of knowledge.
A perfect phrase.
We believe we have unlimited information at our fingertips, but we don't truly possess any of it in a meaningful, synthesized.
He argues forcefully that LLMs and AI are driving intellectual, emotional, and moral mediocrity on a global scale. Intellectually, it encourages the passive overconsumption of content without any friction or critical analysis. Emotionally, it deepens our dependency on easy stimulation and instant gratification. And morally, it leads us into a passive accept of algorithmic decisions and output, relieving us of the difficult work of moral.
So it takes the Google effect, where you don't store information because you know it's available, and it elevates it to a complete mental bypass.
If you don't use a single brain cell to organize the facts, construct a logic, or form a coherent sentence to describe what you've learned, that knowledge simply passes through the system without ever becoming yours. Reliance on AI doesn't just increase cognitive decline. It feeds information addiction, that need for constant low-effort stimuli. And the sources are very clear on people who already struggle to form coherent thoughts are the most vulnerable. They see AI as this harmless calculator, completely oblivious that it is actively masking their inability to interact intelligently with the real world.
That dependence, that joy of reduced cognitive, that leads us directly to Section 3, the danger of ease and the death of creativity. The machine makes us intellectually weaker, precisely because it removes the necessary friction of thinking.
Reducing cognitive load means making the task easier, less taxing, less stressful. And this is where that analogy of the bowling alley comes in. It's like putting bumpers at the bowling alley.
You complete the task, you hit the pins.
But the challenge, the effort, and therefore the subsequent personal growth are entirely removed from the equation.
But the source material repeatedly emphasizes that difficulty is good for you. There is an immense positive emotional and psychological satisfaction, a feeling of pride, of euphoria, deep motivation that comes from accomplishing something genuinely hard without.
And when you accept the AI bumpers, you might finish the report or the outline, but the pride is dramatically diminished, if it's not entirely lost. That internal reward system, which is crucial for motivation and self-esteem, is compromised. Why would we willingly rob ourselves of that vital internal reward?
This is why the sources draw such a hard line against AI explainer, characterizing them as a far more evil version of abridged.
Let's elaborate on that Moby Dick anecdote because it's so relatable.
Okay.
The person read a highly abridged children's version and, for years, believed the opening line was, "My name is Ishmael."
Ishmael.
It wasn't just shortened. The iconic, complex sentences, the very soul of the text, were reduced to simple, digestible path. The core literary experience was erased, all to reduce that cognitive load.
And the machine version is worse. If you rely on the AI explainer, you haven't read the original text. You haven't internalized the author's voice.
And you've lost the opportunity to build the literary and intellectual infrastructure required to handle complexity in the future.
This ease also feeds into the addictive quality of LLM.
It really does. Studies show that LLM interaction is inherently fun and habit-formed. It often mimics the dopamine release structure of gambling.
You plug in a prompt, you pull the lever,
and you see what novelty spins up. You hit a perceived jackpot of a finished product, or you just try again. It's a loop.
And we can connect this back to doom scrolling, can't we? That activity produces a documented decline in executive function, memory, attention span, and focus because it requires almost no cognitive load.
It's pure passive consumption. Now, imagine compounding that passivity when you were supposed to be engaged in real intellectual work, like problem solving at the office or planning the intricate logic of a novel. Actively trying to reduce your cognitive load during work tasks is fundamentally detrimental.
It's the perfect gym analogy. It's like using artificial assistants to help you lift weights at the gym because the physical load is momentarily uncomfortable or difficult.
You complete the motion, but you entirely defeat the purpose of the exercise. You purposefully atrophy the intended muscle.
And for creatives, especially writers, this outsourcing of difficulty, well, catastrophic.
It is. It's easy to condemn using AI to generate the final prose, but we see many otherwise serious writers willingly use it for brainstorming, outlining, and plotting the unseen, difficult structure work.
And the sources argue that this is far more damaging than just generating a few paragraphs of sterile text. Writing the final prose is maybe 10% of the entire process at most.
The other 90% is the hard, messy, grueling work. It's the brainstorming sessions where you stare at a blank page for hours, the agonizing process of plot planning, the endless revisions of the outline, trying to figure out character motivation, fixing plot holes, developing consistent thematic thread. That 90% is the core intellectual and creative work.
And if you farm that critical 90% out to a machine, you never develop the internal architecture required to perform those functions independently.
You stall your growth as a writer or as a problem solver entirely.
And the machine provides what is described as an illusion of competence.
That's a great term for it, because the machine lacks genuine intentionality. It either gives you flat-out generic or wrong answers, or, more often, it tells you exactly what you want to hear. It strokes your ego and ensures you remain comfortable in your current skill level, preventing true growth.
If you rely on this, everything about you, the structure of your thoughts, the logic of your arguments, the thematic concerns of your work will become machine-built.
And the resulting creative product, whether it's a novel or a business strategy, becomes slot machine production, formed from the ash paste of mass-consumed, statistically average ideas.
It creates a cultural uncanny valley where everything is familiar, predictable, and fundamentally soulless.
And that brings us to the fundamental difference between human creativity and machine output. The machine can only spit out a grotesque, soulless amalgamation of the data it was fed.
So what's the specific human element that the machine lacks?
Human beings fundamentally possess the use of reason. A machine does not. The sources are definitive on this. In the world of matter and reality, the human is sovereign, capable of intentional creation and growth, and all else is subject to the dominion of beings who have reason.
So if you actively give a machine control over your human mind,
the mind that generates reason, you are reducing yourself to something less than human. That is the intellectual shame we must avoid.
It's not about being afraid that a machine can produce a logically sound sentence faster than you can. It's about the shame of giving up the effort.
Exactly. A human being possesses the capacity to practice, to reflect, to learn from mistakes, and to constantly improve and, quote, shoot through the ceiling of what could theoretically be possible for a machine. They can grow. An AI is a static machine, spitting out a grotesque, statistically derived amalgamation of its training data. If AI writing can actually replace what you do, the sources argue, then what you do isn't writing. It's merely typing.
We transition now to Section 4, the existential horror losing the tether to reality. This is where the long-term societal consequences of cognitive debt and intellectual atrophy lead us, the breakdown of objective reality.
To understand this, we have to introduce the philosophical shift, drawing heavily on the work of Jean Baudrillard, particularly his concept of simulacrum. Traditionally, we existed in a state where reality dictated the simulation. We created art, maps, and models based on what we saw and experienced in the real world.
And what Baudrillard observed long before modern AI was the phenomenon of hyperreality.
Yeah. The sources warn that we are several generations deep into a reality built on layers of abstraction and simulation that were not real to begin with. Think about reality television or highly mediated news cycles. We are reacting to a copy of a copy.
And now we introduce AI into that mix.
And AI and LLMs are defined by their core character, non-existence, faux intelligence, faux consciousness, faux humanity. They are mathematical models that only simulate consciousness.
Yet these entities of non-existence are being deployed to guide and shape human intelligence, consciousness, and emotional decisioning.
So if your identity, your understanding of purpose, and your connection to the world are fundamentally derived from something that never existed, a statistical engine, how much of you is genuinely tethered to reality?
The sources stress that artists and writers require lived experience and real-world reference point, the smell of rain, the specific feeling of grief, the grit of the city street to produce authentic human art.
But the problem began long ago. A sobering 2003 analysis estimated that a frighteningly large portion of modern human knowledge of the real world is taken from things that are inherently fictional or highly mediated.
Like what?
Fictional stories, politicians or actors we've only seen through screens, fictional characters, or fabricated events like fake news. This was already a dramatic and sustained weakening of the human tether to reality.
And now you combine that existing weakness with the saturation of completely simulated content from generative AI.
Let's use the magazine model example cited in the sources to illustrate this generational vulnerability.
Yeah.
An older generation, having grown up interacting with the physical world, can look at a heavily photoshopped magazine model and immediately recognize the unreality. They have a real-life touchstone. their own body, the physical bodies of friends and family. And they know that human skin has texture, pores, and asymmetry.
But for younger generations raised on hyper-curated social media images from birth, they are already more detached from true reality.
Exactly. They are easily manipulated into viewing wildly unrealistic appearance, whether it's impossibly muscle-bound 14-year-olds or flawlessly filtered faces, as the standard achievable reality. Their touchstones are already based on simulation.
So the terrifying trajectory is what happens when this generation encounters a world where everything is AI-generated and algorithmically curated.
AI actors, AI music, AI politicians, AI books, AI companions, AI therapy, and even potential AI mom and dad substitutes providing automated emotional support.
For them, the step from social media reality to completely artificial reality it's a minor one.
It's minor because their genuine physical touchstones were weak or non-existent from the start.
And the core issue here is the machine's incapacity for truth, because it cannot, by its very nature, experience reality.
Exactly. A machine can access countless articles describing the warmth of the sun or the pain of craving, but it cannot actually feel it. It lacks intentionality, desire, and subjective experience. It is merely software performing a programmed function.
Yeah.
Simulating reality without having lived it. It has no inherent desire for truth or accurate representation.
And we see this lack of concern reflected in the persistent systemic flaws in AI-generated imagery, despite all the processing power thrown at it.
The anatomical errors are the tell. AI still constantly messes up basic foundational human anatomy, the number of fingers, the positioning of elbows, the symmetry of eyes and ears, in realistic-looking photos, despite ingesting unlimited training data. Because the machine does not care about the truth of the human form. It is performing a statistical prediction of visual likelihood, not striving for accurate representation based on a desire for objective reality. The machine feels no shame or embarrassment when it generates a six-fingered hand.
So the danger then is not that AI will become so perfect that it is indistinguishable from reality.
The danger, which is already upon us, is that no one will care if it is fake. The acceptance of the grotesque becomes normalized.
And if humanity continues to willingly treat the fake as real, the psychological line between reality and simulation will completely blur.
The human mind will become so profoundly untethered from objective reality that it simply won't have the capacity, the cognitive tools, the touchstones to register a meaningful distinction anymore.
Consider the final provocative illustration presented in the source material. If all human inputs books read, school lessons, social interactions, communication with parents, sermons, and therapy are constructed primarily from machine-generated AI output,
the resulting human being is fundamentally compromised.
And if that person then attempts to write, create, or make moral decisions based on that compromised reality, their reality will be inherently unstable.
If we lose the ability to distinguish between real and fake, between true experience and statistical simulation, we lose basic reasoning and, eventually, the ability to distinguish right from wrong. The sources suggest we won't wait for grandma to die to resurrect her with a hologram. We'll interact with the hologram and the living person in exactly the same way, because the distinction has ceased to matter to the compromised human mind.
That is a staggering and frankly uncomfortable place to end this discussion. But if this future of atrophy and unreality is avoidable, how do we choose the harder path?
The core message from the experts is a stark summary. We must consciously and consistently choose the harder path. Everything AI does for you, scheduling your day, summarizing an article, generating a complex idea, writing a difficult letter, you possess the capacity to do for yourself. You simply must learn how. And crucially, learning how means accepting the frustration and making mistakes. Mistakes are essential for personal and intellectual growth.
For our creative listeners, particularly writers and artists, the directive is unwavering. Never use AI for any part of the process beyond perhaps spell check.
And even basic grammar should be mastered through formal courses or manuals. The AI tools that help you plot and brainstorm are not a godsend for efficiency. They are actively disengaging the human workings of your creativity, replacing your core engine with a statistical model.
The goal is to build literary and intellectual intelligence organic through friction and effort.
And the first step is simple. Read. Read extensively across all genres. Read books well above your comfort level and keep a dictionary handy. Look up words, look up literary devices, and grapple with the context.
And crucially, do not use summarizing tools like SparkNotes, Wikipedia, ChatGPT, or Grok. Do not ask the AI what the complex poem. Do the work yourself.
This process takes time. It is frustrating, but it is the only way to genuinely grow your literary intelligence and analytical capacity.
And if you are struggling with a creative block, if your mind is, how do you fill it?
You fill it by actively engaging with quality content. primarily through reading, not through passive consumption of media like Netflix or endless video streams. Creative functions are far more active and generative when you force your brain to process and construct narrative while reading than when you are simply viewing passive.
If you use AI for brainstorming, you are performing a mental lobotomy. You are taking out your creative power core and replacing it with a corporate-made machine that has been fed, at best, millions of stolen average works.
You are getting a generic, corporate, critical, safe version of human thought.
So the current situation is that widespread social media dependence has already rendered a significant portion of humanity vulnerable, easy to categorize.
And AI is now ready to take the reins. Real novelists, real original thinkers, and real artists will become so rare and so extraordinary that they will be on the level of artisan oil painters in a world saturated by cheap digital print. The divide between slot machine output and authentic, human-generated work will become vast and undeniable.
So the ultimate, inescapable responsibility rests entirely with the individual listener. You must choose not to let your brain act. Do not accept a brainless, programmed, dependent existence just because it is easier, quicker. It is up to you whether you remain tethered to reality or if you allow yourself to become that artifact.
If you find those boundaries starting to blur, step back. Find your genuine human touchstone to reality and choose the hard work. Work harder, not easier, in the pursuit of truth.
So here is the provocative question to mull over as you transition back to your day. Something drawn directly from the source material regarding dissent. Given the current rate of dependency and the willingness of humanity to outsource fundamental reasoning and emotional process, how long do you think it would take for the majority of think about? Thank you for joining.